welcome to the latest edition of Kellett Live on Facebook. Today we're turning our attention to examinations, both the preparation for and dealing with the examination itself. I'm joined by two very experienced teachers from our senior school, Avisha Tank, who is Assistant Head of Wellbeing, and Hoi Chan, who is Assistant Head of Academics. So between them, they'll be helping us delve into both the stress and the techniques involved, how to handle the stress. So please do post your messages in the comments section, and I will put those questions to these two helpful ladies a bit later on. Right, let's dive in. So I think we'll start with the preparation side, and then perhaps move into the examinations themselves, and then look at how critically, I don't think people talk about enough, is what you do after an exam and how you deal with some of those mixed emotions. But first of all, perhaps you could just briefly tell us what you do here at Kellett and what your experience is of helping students prepare for exams.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. So, Hoi Chan, Assistant Head Academic here at Kellett right now. I am just entering my 14th year of teaching, and in that time I've been a tutor to Year 7 all the way up to Year 13, also as a Head of Physics here at Kellett, and now Assistant Head. So I've seen both the pastoral and academic side in supporting students through exams, so I'm really happy to be here and to share my thoughts and advice with you guys.
Thank you, Hoi. My name is Avisha Tank. I am Assistant Head Pastoral here at Kellett School. I'm entering my 15th year in pastoral leadership. I have been a head of year in my previous school, supporting students from Year 7 and the same students all the way up until Year 12. At Kellett School, I spent 7 years as head of house, and last year I entered my new post as assistant head. Over those last 15 years, I've had a lot of interactions with students and parents, supporting them with looking after themselves during this incredible journey of education in senior school, and I really believe that well-being and self-care needs to complement that we do with the academics. So looking forward to sharing some insights.
Great, thank you both. Right, our GCSE students, they do their examinations, their main examinations in Year 11. They can be doing as many as 10 different subjects, which can mean up to and possibly above 30 exams, which is making me feel a bit sick just thinking about it. That can be overwhelming, daunting. How, at the very beginning, should students be preparing themselves for that run-up? What are the key tips you have right at the beginning?
So for me, from the academic side, by that time, hopefully they'll have had lots of experience of kind of doing past papers and practicing and really securing their knowledge. And in school we do lots of in-class assessments, and we run mock exams for students in order for them to feel relatively ready by the time their exams come around. So preparation is key when we're talking about looking ahead to your exams, and using the time when they start their course in Year 10 to put things into place and instill good study habits. So here at Kellett we work with Elevate, and we start those study skills sessions and workshops in Year 7, and we have them throughout the year. So hopefully by the time your exams come around, you have an idea of what good study habits are and what you should be doing in order to be successful in your studies.
I think goal setting is really key. We speak to our students a lot about SMART goals, and each goal making sure that it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic and relevant, and also it's time-based. So one of the things that we really support students with is creating that timetable. So for example, even if you're a Year 10 student starting that journey at Kellett School, we have a homework timetable. So it allows students to have specific goals each night, and this is something that will feed into those revision timetables. One of the key aspects that I would really explore from the pastoral end is making sure that within these timetables that we're also taking some time for breaks and self-care. This is really valuable in order to ensure that students aren't burning out, and taking time to focus on them to lead into positive emotions.
Great. Can we just delve in a bit more? So students will often have a lot of independent study time in the run-up. How can they best prepare for that? So having a timetable, but can we just delve in a bit more and offer a few more tips and tricks for that?
Yeah, so as Bav said, having a timetable, a revision timetable, is absolutely key. We let students go off on study leave where they are not in timetabled lessons in school, so actually having that designated time for each subject is incredibly important. We recommend you chunk up your revision so you don't just focus on one big topic with lots and lots of things, because that can be quite overwhelming. In terms of coming up with a revision timetable, I personally suggest to students at the beginning they just follow their school timetable. So each day they have a little bit of different subjects every day, and so that gives them the 15 minutes, an hour for them to focus on one specific subject, and even within that, one specific topic within a subject. And then, research says that interleaving and spaced practice is really beneficial. So following that timetable ensures that the students will address a topic, do a different one, and then come back to maybe the subject that they were doing at the beginning. And that really, really helps with, embedding that learning into their minds, and that they're ready to use that knowledge in exams.
So that's called interleaving.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a new phrase for me. So studying a subject but making sure to come back to it at a later date.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would also say that when you get to the process of independent study, when you're no longer in class or school, having some flexibility. So for example, students will be working at home, and that's great. But also, being at home in front of the same desk, day in, day out, over a period of a number of hours, can be really quite overwhelming. At Kellett School, our school is open for our students. We have designated areas for students to work both independently, but also to work collaboratively with their peers and their friends, which I think is really important, of having that changed environment. When it comes to independent revision time, I think it's really key for students to really focus on their strengths and their weaknesses. Often students will be fixated on the areas that they do really, really well in, but that's a great opportunity to factor in time for those areas that they perhaps need to develop. Again, during that time, students can often feel quite isolated because they're left to their own devices, but there are lots of support available for students. Whether it's connecting with your tutor or your class teachers, we really encourage students to maintain that dialogue and conversation with their teachers to ensure that they are prepared and they have everything that they need to be successful, especially when it comes to that independent revision time.
Great advice. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah, and going back to the revision timetable, you need to plan ahead. So what we recommend to students is they map out between study leave, when they go on study leave, and their exams. So the first thing they do is to put into a calendar all their exams, the dates of all their exams, so that they know when they are, and also to help work backwards and plan their time, and to figure out what to focus on. So initially you kind of want to do general revision, hit your areas of weakness, which you should know by now from all the in-class assessments and mock exams as well. So that's kind of the beginning, and then as time goes on and exams creep closer and closer, you can then be flexible, like Bav says, and switch up your revision and start to focus on the exams that are coming up more immediately.
One of the things that we find students often omit from their timetables is moments of self-care. And I think that's really key, especially towards the end of the day or to break up your day. There's a lot of benefit to have a change of environment, going for a walk at lunchtime, or doing an activity, exercise, or connecting with your friends and having a conversation about life. I think is really key.
Yeah, healthy distractions, always good. What about revision techniques? I mean, I remember back in the day writing on endless cards. I'm sure things are much more sophisticated now. What are the different techniques out there, and what have you seen work well?
Well, for a subject like science and maths, more knowledge-based subjects, I think they work slightly different to the skills-based subjects. But for us, we do recommend, when you're trying to retain knowledge, to do flashcards. So you were mentioning, Laura, that you just wrote things down on cards, and that is an incredibly important part of our revision in sciences, where you are having to remember lots of knowledge. So testing yourself, mini tests, whether that's by yourself with flashcards or with a friend collaboratively, or parents can get involved. We recommend students, as they learn the content, they make flashcards for their own revision. So it will be a question on one side and then an answer on the other side. That way it's really easy for them to test themselves. They read the question, they say the answer out loud, and they flip it over. So flashcards are incredibly important for knowledge retention. Skills-based subjects are slightly different?
I would say yes. As an English teacher, we have lots of different texts and poems and non-fiction articles and extracts to cover. I think it's really important that students think about the tools that we have available. There are amazing online resources available, short snippets of videos, opportunities to really whittle down your notes with images or keywords. And in terms of a subject like mine, it's really important to do as much practice as you can, practicing exam questions, or simply just looking at exam questions and underlining the keywords and creating a plan. Often students feel really overwhelmed with how do I revise for English, and simply creating a plan opposed to writing a full response is very, very effective. Videos in English are key. There's lots of amazing resources on Quizlet, GCSE Pod, that really provide great summaries for our students. So I think that's helpful for students in English.
Yeah. And closer to the time of your exams, you will be doing past papers and making sure you go through as many questions as you can. And in that case, you will then need to hopefully have some questions and ask questions. So it's not necessarily a revision technique, but as part of your revision, you should definitely be doing past paper questions, and you should definitely be seeking support if you need it. So, our teachers are always on hand, like Bav says, during study leave. Students are invited to come into school if they need. Not that they have to, but actually we are here, teachers are here to answer questions if they need. But yeah, so for knowledge-based, it's very much test yourself frequently, making sure that you're retaining that understanding and knowledge, and testing your understanding in past paper questions as well.
Great, maybe we can share some of those resources with our Facebook viewers after this. I think that would be helpful. Can we just focus a little bit now, maybe this is more for you, Visha, on the stress levels and how students in the revision phase can kind of keep those in check and set good habits ready for when things escalate and get more stressful when the exams are looming.
Let's face it, all students are different, and we are going to be experiencing a range of different emotions. I know that when I think about my examination experiences, I experience stress, and one of the key aspects is to really normalise the language that we use. It is going to be a roller coaster of a journey, and the first and foremost step is to really recognise and acknowledge those steps and those emotions so that we can put action in place. Students will feel stressed, students will feel overwhelmed. We know that. So what are we going to be doing about it? One of the key things that we do at Kellett School is we're very lucky to have a subject called Positively Kellett, where we really are able to focus on emotions. And we know that we can have automatic negative thoughts. These are thoughts that are going to cause doubt. These are going to be thoughts that are going to cause, self-worry and, question ourselves. And really it's about acknowledging and recognising when those things are happening and when those thoughts are occurring. Lots of people may already be exploring a stress bucket, and with that we talk about an analogy. All of the water that goes into your bucket are the stresses in our lives. We have lots of stresses: exams, homework, deadline, things going on at home, friends. That's part of life. And what we encourage our students to do is think about what are the tools that alleviate these stresses, and these are the holes in your bucket. So what we really encourage students to do, and all students listening today or parents thinking about how to support their child, is think about what are the stresses that your child is experiencing and where are the tools that can help. So for example, if somebody is really struggling with a particular subject, they might go to speak to a member of staff in their school or their subject teacher. If someone is really struggling with revision, students have experienced exams previously. At our school, we spend a lot of time giving students an opportunity to support one another. So our Year 10 students will have an opportunity to speak to our Year 12 and 13 students to get some tips and tricks. It's really important to ensure that when we are in these thinking traps, that we reframe our thinking. All schools prepare students for examinations. So whether it's a class homework, or whether it's an assessment, or whether it's a mock exam, it's really important to reassure students that there are lots of opportunities where you have been successful, and to keep going back to those moments to really build up that confidence.
And it's making sure that you have that network and that you access that network when you need. So, from a subject perspective, we absolutely love students coming in and asking us questions, because we then can help them better. It's those students who sit and never ask and never come into school that we're most worried about, because actually if they are coming in, it means that we are helping to alleviate their stress and their worry about whatever's going on for them in that subject. So yeah, really using that support network.
Great advice, thank you. And getting very practical, what is a good environment? What sort of space, and how can students best get the scene right for optimal revision?
That's a really good question. So, going back to my previous point, hopefully by now, by the time they get to GCSE exams or A-level exams, they've had lots of smaller assessments. And what I would highly recommend is throughout year 10, year 11, and then obviously year 12 and the early parts of year 13 is test out what kind of environment works for them. I think, everybody is individual, everybody's different, everybody likes different things and likes to sit in a different chair. So, we can't say what exact environment works for them. So they need to make sure that over time they've practiced and they've tried out different places in order to come up with, the final place that does definitely work for them.
I would say making sure it's a quiet and comfortable space. One of the number one distractions that young people have are mobile phones and technologies and social media. Making sure that all of those distractions are away from your working space is key. Being in a place that is well lit will also have a huge impact. Natural lighting or good lighting is really key. And when you get to that point where it's study leave and you're not in school, having some flexibility. Being in the same place, like I said previously, can create fatigue, can create boredom. So making sure that you are changing things up. I know from our experiences, some students don't even like to come to school, but they will go into a local library, for example, where it's quiet area to focus on what they are doing. But the biggest aspect would be, for many people, would be technology and making sure that they're switching off or putting on their phone onto airplane mode or silent mode.
And the technology is there now that you can, adjust your do not disturb for certain apps. So, social media we know is a very big issue amongst teenagers in terms of distraction, in terms of, wanting to connect and look at all these things. So, switching your apps off, the notifications off your apps. I know that there's also other apps that kind of promote, focus. So, one student last year was using one, she loved it. It was a collaborative one, so you could see each other's little forests. So the amount of time that you didn't use your phone for, it grew little trees, and so you could compare with each other and make it into a little game. But the point is that, it stopped them from using their phones, it stopped them being distracted, and it helped them to focus on what they were supposed to be doing.
Yeah, nice. And supporting one another, which of course is important, isn't it? When you're all in that shared experience. So turning now to parents, shouldn't they get involved? If so, how? What things should parents be avoiding?
I think this is a really tricky one for parents. You don't want to be overbearing and overwhelming your child. But one of the things I would say is to have that open communication with your child. In the initial phases, help them with creating that timetable that works for them. Often students think that once they've created their timetable, that's it sticks. But if you can identify and see from a parent perspective that something isn't working, offer guidance and support. Looking back at our experiences here in Hong Kong, parents have had lots of opportunity during the home learning period to have an active part in their child's learning. Let's use that to our advantage. Let's call it our parent powers, for example. We know what our students look like when they're stressed or feeling overwhelmed. And at those moments, really listen to them, observe their body language and their emotions and their mood. Do they need some support and guidance? Most importantly, I think from a parent perspective, help them with their goals. Encourage them, provide those supportive, reassuring comments. Those will go a long, long way. But also, if they have concerns, listen to them and help them guide them to the right people for them. Research shows that children are most open at night time. So during that bedtime routine, have an opportunity to reflect on how the day has gone. What were the strengths of that day? Celebrate those, but what are the areas to work on for the next day? And I think once you have that open communication and dialogue, that helps foster a really calm environment where the student's going to feel supported at home, just as they are supported at school.
Yeah, and from a practical perspective, I would say, if you come up with the timetables together, fantastic, and then put that in a shared space so everybody knows and everybody can see when they're supposed to be doing what, and then guide them back onto the right track if they are veering off a little bit. And really just making sure that you are all collectively working towards the same goal, and I think that really goes a long way. I mean, another piece of research also suggests that praising effort, that's really important. If you see them working hard, if you recognise it, and it's about them, it's about them. So making it about them, making sure that they feel that they are supported, and saying well done when they do put in the time, and guiding them when they veer off a little bit.
I think factors also at home that parents are really engaged with and part of. So, for example, your day-to-day routines. When it comes to that period of examination and independent learning, I think it's really important to ensure that your child has got a regular routine established. What time are you waking up? Be consistent. Equally, what time are you going to bed? After a busy day of revising, it is incredibly important that all of our students are getting enough sleep. So being able to encourage and foster good routines there is really important. Also, when it comes to nutrition, healthy snacks, making sure that we're having nutritious meals, but also reflecting and encouraging and modelling self-care. What does that look like for you and your family? What does dinner time look like? How are we all putting our devices away? I think it's really important to be present and for families to really promote and model that at home as well.
Yeah, I think now, I've recently become a parent over the last few years, and there is a fine line between, like you said earlier about being overbearing and too involved and too hands off. I would err on the side of being more involved at a time like exams, because they do need that support. But it's about supporting, and we have to be realistic with our expectations and at school, and hopefully we are all realistic in our expectations, and supporting the student as best as possible.
Great, lots of good tips there for parents. Thanks for that. Okay, we're getting closer to examination time now. What should students be doing in that sort of, the countdown has begun, the exam timetable is front and centre. How do they best prepare for that in that final stage, and managing the emotional stress that comes along with that added pressure?
Yeah, I mean, for me, from the academic side, hopefully there's been a whole process, and by that time, everybody has done as much preparation as they can. We do ask students, have you done as much as you can? And, we say to them, realistically, you should be saying, yes, I've done everything I can. And so by that time, hopefully, all that hard work has been put in. At that point, what is important is that they just review. So light review, and, as time goes on, it's not necessarily about cramming anymore. It's about kind of, okay, let's just remember the small gaps that we might have and go back and, specifications. Every course will have a specification, and it's just lightly going through everything, and hopefully we're like, yes. Oh, this small bit, I haven't got this quite yet. Let's just spend a bit of time. But like I said, it's a whole process. It's not just about that moment just before exams, or that short period of time before exams. It is, preparation, and school will do everything we can to prepare them through mock exams, through in-class assessments, and it's making sure, collectively we, parents, teachers, students, have done everything we can up until that point.
And I think, going back to what Hoy just said, it's really important that students trust the process. Over the period of 2 years, we have had lots of opportunities and checkpoints. And I think, going back to what I said earlier about negative self-talk, our automatic negative thoughts that we have, that's part of human nature. But also just reframing those thinking traps, and, believe that you can do it. And also making sure that the routine, you mentioned late night cramming. Let's face it, we've all done it at some point in our lives where we stayed up really late to prepare for an assessment. But when we've got a series of exams, it's really important to have a clear routine to make sure that we're rested and ready to go.
Great. And now the exam itself. Now, the old adage, always read the question properly, is obviously front and centre to this. But what top tips for actually being in the exam? So, time management, keeping stress low, manageable. What would you recommend there?
I'm going to start with entering the exam room. Let's face it, going into an exam room with 100 other students preparing for an exam can be a really overwhelming experience. Again, every student is going to be very different. Some students are going to feel really confident that they prepared, and other students are going to have anxiety and worry about what's to come. One of the things while we're waiting for students to come into the exam room that we encourage our students to do or explore are breathing techniques to make sure that they're remaining calm. Another tool that we use is also visualization. And visualization is twofold. Sometimes students can feel really anxious and worried, and so therefore they might visualize a place that they feel really calm. For example, it might be a beach where they're thinking about the sounds of the water, or the feel of the sand with their feet. Visualization also can work the other way when we're thinking about that process of an exam. What does being successful in this exam look like? When I turn over this paper, what am I expecting to see? How does being successful in this exam make you feel? So going through those motions can also really build confidence. So breathing tools and visualization is really key, especially if we're feeling quite worried in those initial stages in the exam room.
Yeah, practically. So, we've sat down where we've got the paper in front of us. As soon as the invigilator says, you may open your paper, I would highly recommend students go through the paper to know what's coming up. Nobody likes surprises, and nobody says that you have to do the exam in the order that the paper is. So absolutely flick through, check that anything that's difficult, maybe just have in your mind that you're ready for that to be difficult, or do it first, do that question first to get it out of the way. But I would say, planning ahead in that exam time, you're in timed conditions. Make sure that you know what you're going to be doing within that time, and making sure that you're prepared for how much you have to write, for example, in that time. I would also say, back to my point about preparation, you'll have had mock assessments, you'll have had in-class assessments, so really, by the time you get into the exam, you should have an idea of how long it takes you to answer a certain type of question, or, an English essay, how long it takes you to write. So having all of that in mind, hopefully should help you feel calm. So using all those assessments in class, using the mock exams, really make sure that you're learning from each and every single one of those experiences along the way is really going to help you feel a bit calmer when you sit down to your real exams.
Yeah, these past papers are key, aren't they? And such an advantage now to have the internet where you can access those so easily. Okay, and one issue which I never see discussed very often, but is how would you recommend students handle the sort of post-exam period? I'm sure some students are rushing straight off to check whether they've got this question right or wrong, or they're discussing with their friends who perhaps found it easy or particularly difficult, and all those sort of mixed emotions that can come forward once the exam has finished, and you've still got to get yourself ready for the next one that's possibly not that far off.
To all the students listening, I would really think about reevaluating the purpose for doing so. For example, with my subject, English, every person is going to have a different response or interpretation. And I think it's really important to be aware that students are going to be responding differently to exam questions. Comparing yourself can have a detrimental impact. If you've written something different to somebody else, it will question whether you were successful or not, and therefore it can create a lot of worry and can create a lot of anxiety. Like I said, evaluating the reasons. For some students it might be this reassurance of, yes, I got that correct, and you can move on. And for others it might create the anxiety and worry. So I'd really evaluate what the purpose is. If it can provide you with closure, great. But if you feel that looking at the answers is going to cause a detrimental impact, I would really avoid doing that. And as always, remember, you have a series of examinations that once an exam's taken place, you really do need to just park that and really focus on the next exam.
It's a little bit harder in a subject like physics, where you have a right and wrong answer, and I think that's where it could be incredibly detrimental. And I say to my students in class assessments, it's about what you can do, and ultimately these exams are about what can you do, not what the person around you or next to you or in front of you can do. And so it's really kind of remembering you're here to sit your exams for yourself, and also you've just sat the exam. You can't change anything that you've written in the paper, so in reality discussing it is to what end, right? And it's about focusing on yourself. I would also say, what did you learn from sitting that paper? Did you realise that you ran out of time, or did you realise that actually you need to focus more on a certain area? It's really about yourself and what are you going to do to make sure that you are successful in your next exam, because there will be a next exam and there will probably be a few more exams after that. So, it's about making use of that time to really kind of make sure that you are going to do well.
Yeah.
I think what Hoy just picked up on is the language that we use, whether you're a parent, whether you're a class teacher, whether you're a student, whether it's a homework, assessment, exam. I think it's really important to celebrate the successes. Every single opportunity that you have in classwork, homework, examination, there are going to be successes. Reward yourself for that. As we've said, sitting examinations, if you're a GCSE student, this is your first opportunity to sit formal examinations. You are going to continue to sit formal examinations in your education future. So really celebrating those moments, I think, is really key. We can often go straight to the negative, and I think we need to acknowledge and reward ourselves in that process, but also take away, important learning experiences from things like exams.
Definitely, great advice, and celebrate the fact that it's over,
Mm-hmm.
I think, as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, let's turn now to some of the questions that we've been sent by people watching. Christine has asked, my child studies a number of different subjects. Can you advise how should revision differ by subject? Now, we touched a bit on that earlier, but perhaps you could just elaborate a bit for Christine.
Yeah. I think, the subject specialists are the teachers. And the teachers also know their students. So, we will be able to, as a class teacher, we will be able to say, actually, this kind of method works really well for the student. So I would really recommend Christine and her child to approach their subject teacher and say, look, I'm struggling with X, Y, Z, or I'm trying to revise for this topic. Ask for advice. Like, we are here as teachers to offer advice and to support the students. We did talk about the fact that there's differences between skills-based subjects and knowledge-based subjects, and those are very general ideas, but actually the teacher knows the student, will know their strengths and weaknesses, will know how they work and what works best for them, and have seen them in the past however long they've been teaching them.
A good takeaway from my subject for English, when you're looking at so many different texts, is being able to summarize key information. So, some students choose to do this in a mind map. Some students choose to do this in flashcards. Some students decide, in our school, we might use a particular acronym, and I'm sure lots of schools for the English subject use different acronyms, using those to really consolidate your notes. I think that's key for my particular subject area, but as Hoy mentioned, there's lots of different techniques that different schools will be using and different subjects will be using. So key is being able to summarise and then therefore go back and retrieve that information. How much can you remember?
So, I mentioned earlier that we work with Elevate, so they do suggest mind mapping, they suggest like different formats of note taking to really help, use trigger words to kind of help them remember things. In science, we also use condensed revision notes, so we get students to actually answer each specification with some notes. And there are lots of different ways, and also, as I said before, students can try out different methods. Before their real exams, I would highly recommend you try out for yourself lots of different ways of revising, and hopefully from that you will learn what works by the time your study leave comes around, or even before that, actually, for mock exams.
Yeah, I think it's great advice there. I think talking to the teacher is a good one, because presumably you've seen all different types of revision techniques and different students along the way. And also not being afraid to try different techniques for different subjects, not feeling like it's one method only that works for you. So, very helpful, thank you. Another question now from Danny, who says, and I feel like this may be my children when they get to exam phase. My son is not very organised and has a habit of procrastinating when it comes to his schoolwork. How can I help and encourage him to be more consistent?
I'm going to go back to creating the SMART goals that are really specific and measured. Often students don't know where to start, so therefore they will procrastinate and they'll leave things off because it can be very overwhelming. If you can help them create short, manageable activities, so for example, an activity that is 25 minutes, which is very specific to a particular subject or a particular aspect of a unit, that will help build their confidence with it. I think that's key to getting them started, and as their confidence increases and they feel as that sense of accomplishment, they'll be able to develop on that later on as well. So creating SMART goals, I think, is really key. That makes it very manageable for the students.
We do also have, Bav mentioned earlier, a homework timetable. So we have this timetable where there are allocated slots. So if they are struggling to organise themselves, actually having their homework timetable means that even if they're not set homework, they can do some work in those slots, which helps to manage their time. And make sure that they're covering all subjects that they need to cover for revision. I would say also, speaking to their tutor. Their tutor will know them personally and have one-to-one meetings with them. So actually, having those conversations and asking for help. I am a bit stuck on how to organise my time. What can I do? And your tutor at Kellett will be able to talk to you one-to-one about that as well.
I think it's also important to ensure that your child has all the resources needed for them to be successful in that particular area. So do they have their textbooks, or do they have their notes, or is there a particular past paper that they need to be successful in that particular session? So, helping them with organisation is key when creating those goals.
Also helps keep stress levels down
Yes.
too, doesn't it? Okay, and so Rebecca is asking how prep students can get into good study routines at home. So maybe we could just think for a minute about how some of these healthy study habits can be introduced for younger students. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, interestingly, we were just having a conversation about prep homework. So just go back to our senior homework timetable. We use, the way it's come about is that you're doing the work of the lessons you had that day. So getting into the habit of reviewing the work that you've done during the day will hopefully help to embed it later on. So, I know prep schools have a slightly more flexible timetable, but they still have certain lessons each day. And I would, from possibly year 5 and 6, I would recommend that, as a parent, if you're wanting to support your child, have a look at what they've studied during the day, and then maybe just sit with them for 10-15 minutes and review what they've done during the day as a starting point. Obviously as prep students, we don't want to overwhelm them and overburden them with extra homework. But yeah, having that reflection, I think reflection is incredibly important, and making sure that you sit down in a suitable area to sit down and think about what you've done as a way to organise your time and support them in their studies in the future.
I think also, reviewing the language that they use when they're referring to themselves. I think it's really important that students get into the habit of being able to identify what their strengths are, but also identifying the areas of, okay, this is the area that I need to focus on. And the more that we can encourage and have that dialogue with our students, the more beneficial it will be for them as they enter senior school. So that would be one of my takeaways for parents and students.
Yeah, and the healthy sleep habits and
Yes.
device use and all of those other things which we've touched on today as well are important, aren't they? A question from Sarah. She's saying that when there was a lot of home learning obviously in Hong Kong, and there was quite a bit of isolation, and her child didn't really fare that well in that isolated environment. How can she make sure that her child doesn't feel that sense of isolation again when it comes to the revision period and the run-up to exams?
Yes, I think that's very valid. I think everybody has experienced isolation during that period of time. And at school, especially at Kellett School, we're doing as much as we can to foster positive relationships and allow students to have those open dialogues. For example, we have, as Hoy said, all of our students have one-to-ones with their tutors so they can raise their concerns. But also our student leaders, our head students have been organising, and this is going to be happening in term 2, an opportunity for students to speak to older students about how to revise, what does good note-taking look like, as well as, creating opportunities to develop positive relationships with their peers and year groups and other students in the school. So I think all schools are doing have lots of different initiatives about how to overcome these challenges of isolation and foster positive relationships within their school communities.
And as the exam come closer and study leave starts, that there is a danger that students just stay at home. And actually, like I said before, we do recommend that students do come in, because there will be other students working in the library, working around school, wherever the designated spaces are. And so really to encourage, if you are beginning to feel like actually you need a bit of company, you need to collaborate a little bit, school is open and there will always be students in here. Last year it was really well used, wasn't it, at school during study leave? Yeah, lots of students came in and they really valued that opportunity to talk to each other and help each other and revise with each other. We had a couple of students who liked to talk when they revise, so they were telling each other, talking to each other as they were revising, and that's really, really helpful. So we do really encourage students to come into school during study leave.
Yeah, I can see how that would be really beneficial, just talking through what you've learned, actually recalling it and explaining it to a friend helps both of you, doesn't it? So, okay, and I think we've got one final question here. There are times when I can see my child struggling with the pressures, the workload pressures. Any tips on how, as a parent, you can help? How would you advise a parent approach that if they can just see it's getting overwhelming, just the sheer volume of revision and preparation required?
I think going back to actively listening, having that conversation about where are these pressures coming from. A lot of our students have very busy schedules. They have got lots of ECAs, they're part of clubs outside of school and represent Hong Kong, which is amazing. But as we run up to exams and when the workload is increasing, it is really important to evaluate and have that open dialogue about where are these pressures coming from. Some of our students do reduce the number of ECAs that they do with the run up to exams, okay? But on the other hand, some of our students find that as a release and an opportunity to de-stress. So I think listening to your child and understanding where they are coming from and what is causing these pressures are going to be really key.
I think also pragmatically, where is that pressure coming from? Are they just trying to do too much themselves? Is that because they really are expecting a lot from themselves? As a parent, then you might need to step in and say, hey, it's okay. I'm not expecting you to spend 6 hours on this thing, and making sure physically that they are spending small amounts of time, chunked amounts of time on their revision, and just really checking in with them, making sure that, your expectations are realistic, their expectations are realistic. School will communicate with home what we are expecting, and there will be times when we do have to get in touch with you if they're not meeting expectations, but conversely, we set our expectations very realistically, and so it's about making sure that you are having that conversation, where is this pressure from, and doing what you can to alleviate that, and really supporting them in making sure their time is broken down and manageable, and they are taking their time to self-care and do things outside of their revision to kind of just take their minds off it, right?
Yeah, a lot of this is reminding me that parents have stressful jobs, and thinking about when they're working, what's the environment that best suits them, what do they do to relieve stress from work, and it's not that different from perhaps this as well when they're working on their own. Perhaps we could finish with your one top tip for exams. If you could narrow it down to one thing, perhaps the most important aspect.
My top tip would be get enough sleep. I think that's really key. Routines, get enough sleep, make sure you're energized, rested. That's going to be key.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier how important sleep is for memory.
Absolutely.
Really key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And mine would be start early. There have been in the past, I've experienced students who've left it too late, and unfortunately they've just really, they've been negatively impacted by leaving it too late. So we as school will prepare you, will start preparing you from year 10 for your GCSEs, year 12 for your A-levels, and make sure that you start early your preparation. And we have many years of experience between all of us as teachers here at Kellett, and so we are telling you these things for a reason. So follow our advice, start early.
Yep. And past papers, that's your other.
Exactly. Practice.
Great. I think that's been so helpful both to parents and hopefully to students too. I think we'll try and leave some of the organisations and other helpful resources that we've mentioned today. We'll add to the Facebook chat so that others can pick those up. But thank you so much for your advice and your tips and your tricks, and hopefully people can have a nice smooth run up to the examinations and really execute them to the best of their ability. So thank you.
Thank you.